My name is Briana Pobiner. I'm a research scientist and educator in the Human Origins program here at the Natural History Museum. And today I'll discuss one of my main areas of research, the first major evolutionary shift in our diets, meat eating. There have been three major changes in our diets over time. The first is eating big animals, which occurred at about 2.6 million years ago, and we'll sink our teeth into this in a moment. The second is cooking both animal and plant foods. This makes a wider varieties of food more accessible, both physically and chemically, for us to digest. This happened by about 800,000 years ago. The third is domesticating plants and animals. This eventually led to a complete change in our diets and lifestyles. This happened by somewhere around 15,000 years ago. So by about 2.6 million years ago, around the time the earliest members of our genus, the genus Homo, evolved, there is evidence for the earliest meat eating. Our ancestors sliced meat from bones, and they bashed those bones open to access fat and calorie-rich marrow. There were four novel things about this dietary behavior. The first is that it involved tool use. The second is that it included eating meat from large animals, much larger than the early humans themselves. The third was that it included deferred consumption, basically not eating something as soon as you find it. And it probably also included transporting carcass parts to some kind of central place for potentially communal consumption. The last is that it likely included scavenging, which put us into indirect or direct competition with larger carnivores. So we know that we know that for most of our evolutionary history, encounters with larger carnivores probably ended up with us on the receiving end of the encounter. We were the hunters, not the hunted. But how did we get to be like this, the most dominant carnivore and really the most dominant species on Earth? In Africa in the Pleistocene, eating large animals put us into competition with larger carnivores, including the lions, leopards, and hyenas of today, plus three kinds of saber-toothed cats. These extinct cats were flesh specialists and may have left meat and marrow on their prey carcasses that early humans could have scavenged. Being able to compete with these large carnivores for food resources has implications for many aspects of our behavior in biology, including complex communication and planning, habitat preferences, body size, home range size, and other aspects of sociality and cognition. Eating meat and marrow, which are high-quality foods potentially available more consistently than ripe fruit and other seasonal resources, has been linked to everything from the expansion of our large brains to changes in our growth and development patterns, to our ability to venture into new habitats, and eventually our exodus out of Africa. But how do we know that early humans ate meat and how much meat they ate? So the smoking guns are marks left behind on fossil bones when early humans butchered those bones with stone implements. These butchery marks include cut marks like the one pictured here, left behind from using sharp-edged tools to remove meat from bones, as well as percussion marks left behind from using rounder tools to break open bones to get at marrow. Many butchery marks on fossil bones are visible to the naked eye, especially if you have a strong light with the angle just right on the bone, but sometimes you need to zoom in with some kind of magnifier. Some of the fossil assemblages I've examined for cut marks are from Kubifora in northern Kenya. I studied fossils from three sites dated to around 1.5 million years ago. This is the time when our ancestor Homo erectus was roaming this area of the Earth. I examined more than 6,000 fossils and found 272 cut-marked and 27 percussion-marked bones. That number may not sound big, but it's actually remarkable for fossils from this time period. In total, 31 animals were butchered from these sites, including extinct antelopes, warthogs, and hippos. But how can we tell more statistically if early humans were eating the meatiest parts of carcasses? We can assume that the primary consumer of a carcass eats the meatiest parts first, like this lion who's licking his lips as he eats the innards, pelvis, and rib cage of this zebra. If early humans butchered carcasses with lots of meat on them, there are two butchery strategies that we might predict. The first is an unbiased butchery strategy, where carcass parts are butchered in proportion to their availability. You butcher any carcass parts that you get. The second is a gourmet strategy. in which only the meatier carcass parts are more frequently butchered. So you may have access to a lot of ribs and less limbs, but you would butcher mostly limbs if they're meatier and less ribs. If early humans butchered carcasses with little meat left on them, for instance, if they scavenged these carcasses from larger carnivores who ate the meatier parts first, we would predict a butchery pattern where most of the cut marks are on the less meaty parts. A Spearman's rank order correlation shows that at all three of these fossil localities, there's no relationship between the meat yield of bones and the proportion of butchered bones. Basically, the order of numbers in the column on the left do not match the order of numbers in the three columns on the right. This indicates access to carcasses with a fair amount of meat, but it indicates that unbiased butchery strategy, where early humans butchered both the meaty and the less meaty parts of carcasses. They basically butchered anything they could get their hands on, and they fully processed the carcass parts that they got. Along with this evidence for a fairly significant amount of butchery of large animals at this site, there's very little evidence of carnivore involvement, and strangely, there are no stone tools at this site. This evidence indicates some of the world's earliest primary access to the meaty parts of carcasses, control of some areas of the landscape. Basically, early humans were able to keep carnivores away from the places where they were eating animals. And intentional spatial specialization of dietary activities, where early humans were doing butchery in one place and making stone tools in another. This was the beginning of the shift to becoming the hunters, not the hunted. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
Is there any evidence that scavenging continued after hunting started because it was a successful way of getting meat?
So the question was, is there any evidence for scavenging continuing after hunting started because it was a successful way of getting meat? Absolutely. And actually, there was probably a combination of hunting and scavenging going on really at the earliest times of meat eating, continuing well through today. And there are some hunter-gatherer groups today that still scavenge large animals.